G'day everyone, my name's Dave from Lexington Garage. Thank you so much for joining us today on our pilot episode. This is the very first episode of a series where I've decided as a 2-year long Turo host that I wanted to jump online, and although talking to a camera isn't really a strong suit of mine at this stage in my life, I really wanted to lend myself to the Australian community of people who may be interested in starting a Turo business, or perhaps just want to know a little bit more about how it works and the lifestyle that it can support. So this episode's all about what you need to know in 2026 if you're looking to start a Turo business. So there's a few things I want to go through today, and basically the way I'm going to structure this is all the things that I think are the most important foundational things to know before getting into this. Maybe you've worked for someone, maybe you've worked for multiple people in your life, and if you're anything like me, maybe you've had a few narcissistic bosses and you just simply don't want to keep working for other people, and you want to have the flexibility and the ability to work for yourself and essentially start what can be a really meaningful business. So that's effectively how I got into it. Or maybe you've just got a car or two spare at home that you don't really use, and you're looking at the ads on Facebook and YouTube and going, oh wow, gosh, I could rent out my car on Turo and possibly make some extra money. Whatever your situation is and whatever your interest is in Turo that's brought you to this video, I'm going to do my best to cover that and give you the best chance of deciding whether it's right for you or not. So first of all, I just want to say that I absolutely love Turo. I'm super proud to be a part of what is an evolution in the car rental space. And I say that because Turo's only been in Australia for a short period of time, and it's experiencing some of the biggest upgrades and changes that I'm sure historically we're going to look back and go, oh wow, like those days, So it's a really exciting time to be part of the Turo community. It's kind of, in some ways, we're like guinea pigs, but in other ways, it's great because setting up a solid foundation now is going to mean extraordinary success going forward. So first of all, a little bit about us. So we're Lexington Garage. Basically, we're a Melbourne-based boutique premium automotive hire company. We operate via the Turo platform. Obviously, we have a very specific set of parameters for the vehicles that we have. Essentially, we're top of the range only. So all of our cars in all different price points are all top spec models. We believe our customers deserve the best, and that's why we strictly only specialize in top of the range models. So if you're looking for a car that's a little bit nicer and has all the features that you'd want in a nice car, then yeah, we're the way to go. We're also a little bit unique in that we have a very certain set of colors that we purchase vehicles in. We specialize in only prime color vehicles. So we've got blue, red, white, and yellow. All those cars have different energetic meanings. I know a lot of people start a Turo business and it's kind of whatever they've got, or they purchase cars just based on whatever they can get their hands on. We're a lot more specific with the vehicles that we get. Like I said, they have to be top of the range and they have to be in those colors as well. We're not just creating a business, we're creating a brand. Our company, proudly 5-star to date, and very much trying to create a vibe. So that's a little bit about Lexington Garage. I've been doing this for 2 years. Like I said, I've really enjoyed the journey so far. It hasn't been without its challenges, and that's why I think it's really important if you're looking to get into something like Turo, it's important to know what the worst thing that can happen is. I think it's very easy for people to see an ad on the internet and go, oh, great, like I can make a little bit of extra money off a car that I've got, or, maybe I can just go and finance like 10 cars and, make like thousands of dollars a month. And it's kind of easy to have that mindset in the beginning, but I think what I'd really like to do is be the voice of reason. As there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of content out there in Australia about what it's like to run a full-on Turo business in Australia as of yet, I sort of want to start a bit of a online presence where I can be your guide if this is something you want to get into, because there's certainly a lot of things that I didn't know going into the business, and there's definitely a lot of things that I think you should know if you're going to seriously consider doing this as a full-time job or even a side business. And just to give you a little bit of background, for me, my story about getting into the Turo business is quite a heartfelt and touching story, which I'm not going to cover today. I'll do that in a separate episode. But essentially, I'm very thankful that a platform such as Turo exists. It gives me, somebody who's immensely passionate about vehicles, to basically be able to live out my dream job where I own a curated fleet of vehicles that I love, and I also get to be a part of people's amazing experiences. People coming from overseas, interstate, even locals, just being able to be someone who can help other people when they need a car and when they need transport. It's quite a fulfilling job, and I really love the human element. I love the social element, because it's just really nice being able to meet a lot of great people. And luckily, we're the sort of business that to date has attracted some really lovely people. And so meeting them and making new connections and potentially new friends through the community, it's been incredible. So as mentioned, I want to cover everything that I think is important for you to know in 2026 if you're considering starting a Turo business. And I really want to cover the good, the bad, and the ugly, because all of these things matter, especially if you're considering tying up a whole bunch of capital in it. So I have a bit of a system, or a bit of a saying. If you're in the workplace, if you work in the corporate sector or something like that, people use the term KPI for key performance indicators. I use those same 3 letters, but for a completely different thing. See, KPI to me is the 3 things that you need to start a Turo business, all right? Except for me, it stands for knowledge, passion, investment. And they're the 3 things you need to start a Turo business. And I'm going to go through that now, what that means, and how each of those things are very important. It's not really in order. I think, honestly, the most important thing is passion, and I'll cover that soon. So, knowledge. Knowledge. Now, this is something that is probably going to weed out some of the people who just aren't that interested in cars or don't know a lot about cars. I could be wrong. I'm not saying you can't start a Turo business if you don't have any knowledge about cars, but it definitely pays, because in a world where there's so many various different cars to choose from, choosing the right vehicle is extremely important. I can't overstate that, because you're essentially investing in something that is meant to make you money. And so, choosing the right car, having the right mechanical knowledge, reliability, knowing what the risk you're getting into, like it's very much a business of risk profile. You want to be getting into a vehicle that is going to have as little downtime possible, because time off the road is costing you money, and choosing the right vehicles is just extremely important. So I'm going to cover the knowledge that I think you need to get started. So first of all, like I said, knowledge when it comes to starting a Turo business. If you're a newbie and you don't know a whole lot about cars, I'd highly recommend doing your research, talking to, your mechanic, talking to industry experts, going online, watching my friends at Redriven, because they're incredible and they'll tell you everything you need to know about a vehicle before you buy it, especially if you're looking at something German, and I'll get back to that soon. So when it comes to the knowledge, it's incredibly important to have an understanding of what vehicles are gonna do well and which ones aren't. One of the biggest things is that SUVs definitely are a strong segment on Turo, but they also cost a lot to maintain and to service. Like, because they're big and heavy vehicles, they tend to be very hard on consumables, so tires, brakes, and depending on what SUV you get, they can definitely cost more to maintain than a hatchback or a sedan. That being said, there's definitely some vehicles and there's some vehicle brands that I'd be very skeptical about getting if you're going to go on a Turo. Just remember, this is not the cars that you necessarily love, but if you're trying to create a lucrative business here, you need to look at this. What car is going to make me the most money with the least amount of headaches? And this has to heavily influence your decision as to what cars you're going to buy. So we're going to start with German cars, all right? I get it. They're tempting. They depreciate super quickly. So a $20,000 Mercedes-Benz looks extremely appealing on the used market. But once again, as Redriven says, there's nothing more expensive than a cheap Mercedes-Benz. Do your research. German vehicles, built for comfort, built for performance, built for precision, not built for reliability. We're talking BMW, Volkswagen, Audi, Mercedes. Skoda, again, anything that is remotely European is probably going to be troublesome. Again, if you're seriously considering doing this, go on YouTube, watch Redriven's videos that they do around, 5-10-year-old Mercedes-Benz, BMWs, Audis. You will watch endless mechanical problems, endless electrical gremlins. These are all things that when you go and purchase a car, you're basically getting into a relationship with. So whatever problems that a vehicle can conceivably have in the time that you rent it out on Turo, you're going to have to deal with that. And the consequences could be catastrophic if it's something a bit more serious and a guest drives interstate or something like that. And, you don't know how to fix your $20,000 Mercedes-Benz remotely, and there's the windows are going up and down and the lights are flashing and there's a check engine light. It's not going to end well. And this is where it's super important to choose vehicles from manufacturers that are known to be reliable and are known to be as trouble-free as possible. We're talking about the South Korean brands. So you've got Hyundai and Kia. Those two companies are basically the same thing. You can't really lose. If I had to choose out of the two, I'd probably go for Kia, because if you buy one that's less than 7 years old, you're still going to have some manufacturer warranty on it. And trust me, that can come in handy. So Hyundais and Kias, not trouble-free completely. There are some engines and there are some transmissions within the Kia and Hyundai family that you want to avoid. And again, go to Redriven, watch the videos. You'll see Jim talk about the Theta 2 engine, which is in the Kia Optima and a select other number of Hyundai and Kia products. If it wasn't for them and the research that I did and being educated in that way, you probably think to yourself, well, yeah, Kias and Hyundais are pretty reliable, right? But again, it's important to look into and do your research on the specific model that you're looking to buy, right? Then you've got the Japanese car companies. So you've got Mazda, you've got Mitsubishi, you've got Toyota, Lexus. Now, Mitsubishi, sure. Again, you want to do your research. Overall, they're pretty reliable, but there's some CVT transmissions you want to look out for. Mazda's, we've got a Mazda 3, top of the range Mazda 3 in our fleet. We love it. Everyone loves it. It's a really great car, but there's some Mazdas that you probably don't want to get. Like, you wouldn't get a diesel Mazda, for example, because they're terribly unreliable. So, it's not just about the brand in particular, but there are specific models that you want to avoid in each of those. Toyota and Lexus. Now, this is a funny one because I'm sure a lot of people are thinking, oh, well, if I want a trouble-free vehicle, like, wouldn't I just get a Toyota or a Lexus if I can afford it? And sure, why not? But here's the thing. The return on investment probably isn't going to be as high, and the value for money that you're receiving and on the other end of it that the guests are receiving isn't going to be as great. And I'll give you some examples. So let's talk about a Toyota Corolla and let's talk about a Kia Cerato GT. So in the top trim, the Toyota Corolla ZR is nice. It's fairly refined. It has aggressive styling, and it has Toyota reliability. It has no Apple CarPlay, no Android Auto. It has heated seats, but no air-conditioned seats. Sometimes has a sunroof. And as far as any other fairly standard equipment, it's a bit sparse, but people will pay extra for those because they're reliable, and everyone knows that Toyotas are pretty reliable. It's called Toyota tax. And this doesn't just go for the Corolla. This goes for a lot of other Toyotas as well. Now, if you compare that to a Kia Cerato GT, you've got heated seats, air-conditioned seats, wireless Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, sprightly turbocharged engine. The styling is amazing. The interior feels a generation or two newer. And for the same price, that's what we're looking at. We're talking about two vehicles that are roughly the same price. So this is where it pays to know what you're getting for your money and like what features you're going to be able to offer your guests for that money. It's really important. And the Toyota tax doesn't stop there. If you're looking at getting a Lexus, it's even worse. Lexuses are amazing cars. They don't depreciate very much. But on the other side of it, if you try and buy one because you're thinking that it's going to be a great car, yeah, it probably is. But It's not going to have Apple CarPlay. It's not going to have Android Auto, especially if you're getting one that's like more than 5 years old. It's just not going to come with all that equipment. And that's going to be a problem for your guests. Now, there's another thing I've got to talk to you about, and it's depreciation, the depreciation cycle. So if you go out and you want to buy a brand new car, just say you've got 30 grand, you can either get a secondhand Camry or you can buy a brand new MG. You're probably going to be like, all right, well, I'm going to get a brand new MG because it's a brand new car and it's going to be reliable and all that sort of stuff. Here's my concerns. You get a brand new MG, they have an interesting reliability reputation. They've got an interesting reputation in terms of parts availability and after sales support. So if you buy one of those, you'll probably find in a couple of years, it would have easily lost 15, 20% of its original value. So if it drops like even 5 grand in 1 year and you've made 10 grand, then really you've only made 5 grand. And this is something, depreciation, that a lot of Turo hosts don't talk about. But I think it's really important to factor that in. But if you're like me and you buy cars that are between 3 and 7 years old, as a general rule, they've already done most of their depreciating in that time. And so you're not buying something that's like where the depreciation is accelerating. And that's really important. And I can't stress that enough. Buying new cars isn't the answer. And that also brings me to the next thing. Knowledge. Do I finance cars or do I try and buy whatever I can afford outright? I'll cover that more in the investment part of this, but this all ties into the knowledge you should have going into it, because it's not just about the knowledge, it's also the attitude and the mindset that you have, and also your risk tolerance. Because as I'll cover later, if you go and finance a bunch of cars and something happens as a pandemic or, something crazy like that, a world war, it's not too crazy right now. Yeah, like you're going to be stuck with a bunch of assets costing you money, and it's definitely a better option to buy used. Make sure you get pre-purchase inspections before you buy any cars for Turo. You want to make sure they're thoroughly checked out and that any pre-existing problems have been sorted out, because unfortunately, my friends, that problem's going to become your problem and could potentially and unfortunately become the guest's problem. So that's enough about talking about cars in terms of knowledge. I next want to cover passion, because the last part of knowledge also sort of flows into passion. It's important to have the knowledge and the wisdom of knowing that it's not going to be easy. And this is where the P from KPI comes in, passion, right? Now, you might do a job for 360 days a year. With weekends and stuff, it's probably closer to 300. 300 days a year, you work a corporate job. Let's just say out of those 300 days, you have 200 pretty average days. You don't love your job, you just go to work, you do it, trying to pay rent, everything like that. And the other 100 days are either really good or really bad. So that's what most people are experiencing in life, right? Now, with the Turo business, if you're like me and you're extremely passionate about it, you're probably going to find that 360 days of the year are amazing. You love it. You love what you're doing. You love every element of it. But the other 5 days of the year are going to be hell. And this is where passion is so important. If you're the kind of person that's just doing this for money, go do something else. Drop ship or like come up with a consulting business or something like that. Do not start a Turo business if you have zero passion about the concept of renting your car out to other people, because it'll show through in your customer service, in your work ethic, in your workmanship. And overall, the hard times, those 5 days of the year that are absolute hell, someone crashes your car, you have a breakdown that's interstate, you got to go, rescue a vehicle, these are all things that happen every day for hosts all around Australia. If you can't handle that, then it's absolutely not going to work. And the only way to handle it is to be passionate enough about it to take on the chin the bad days and maintain a healthy and positive mindset that will get you through the bad times. So Like I said, if you do any other job, your risk tolerance to, having good days and bad days, it may not fluctuate as much. But within a Turo business, from my personal experience, I've had quite a few unfortunate things happen. And these are all things that I'd like to share with you. I've had a Kia Carnival people mover that just got replacement warranty hydraulic struts installed on the rear tailgate because it's an electronic opening tailgate. Took it to a Kia dealership. They inspected them because they just weren't sounding right. And they said, yep, we've got to replace them under warranty. We'll replace them under warranty. They did that. A week later, a customer and his family were on their way to Sydney. They stopped at Wodonga, which is roughly, it's on the border of Victoria and New South Wales. And they couldn't close it. Those hydraulic struts, the brand new warranty parts, had just failed. Now, this resulted in me having to essentially put them in another hire car, which was too small because there was no Carnivals anywhere near Wodonga that I could put them in from like Hertz or Europcar or anything like that. I had to put them in a 7-seat SUV, which was too small. They had to leave some of their luggage behind. I had to leave Melbourne, drive up to Wodonga, take it to Kia, see if they could help me. In the end, someone was kind enough to actually unbolt them so we could close the tailgate. I had to then go and deliver the Carnival to Sydney, and they had to use that car for the rest of the trip without electric tailgate struts. So that was an extremely stressful, I can't even articulate how many micro decisions had to be made at a really super quick period of time. It was, my brain was in overdrive, just going, okay, I'll solve this problem, solve this problem, solve this problem. He had young kids. It was a hot day. Everyone was stressed and frustrated. They almost didn't make it to Sydney to their accommodation that night. And luckily, the customer service that I provided, I went above and beyond. They still rated me 5 stars, and evidently they've come back and booked other trips with us since then. And I'm extremely lucky. Trust is built when things go wrong and the way that you deal with it, because it's okay to have trips happening and everything's going rosy, but the true character of a professional host that values their customer and the experience more than anything, that really shows when something goes wrong. And we excel at that, and we did. But that doesn't mean it wasn't hard. And honestly, I think for some Turo hosts, that would be enough to tip them over the edge and go, no, it's not worth it. Honestly. Was I thinking that? No. I was kind of like, it's going to be difficult to bounce back from this. I was a couple of grand out of pocket at the time. I had to pay, obviously for all the fuel getting up there. I ended up giving them $150 fuel voucher as compensation. I ended up having to obviously foot the bill for their hire car. It was crazy. Other than that, I've had, guests crash cars. I've had windscreens break. There's always anxiety that a guest is going to be non-compliant and they're not going to pay the money that they owe you for the damage that they cause. That's a common thing, unfortunately. Thankfully, I haven't seen too much of that, but I have heard of it being quite common. So, how does this all relate to passion? Well, I'm explaining this because these are all the things that are going to either make or break you. And if you're like me and you're so committed to starting a proper Turo business with multiple vehicles, we have 9 vehicles at the moment, and we started with 1. And the 9 vehicles that we've got have all come from a belief that this is the right thing for us. I wouldn't invest hundreds of thousands of dollars in something that I didn't believe was actually going to work. And so I've put a lot of trust in myself, in my family, my beautiful wife. She helps me run the business, which is incredible. She'll take me to places. She'll, pick me up when I do airport deliveries. We're a proper family business, and I'm extremely fortunate to be in that position. But the main thing keeping this going is the passion. And again, out of the KPI saying that I have, I think passion honestly takes the cake. Investment, that's debatable. Again, you may not need to really invest anything to get started. You might have a spare car that you just want to make an extra dollar off. And and knowledge, that's all learnable. But passion isn't learnable. You either have a passion for something or you don't, and you can't really learn that. So again, if you're the sort of person that's really passionate about this and you're really interested in starting a Turo business in Australia in 2026, yeah, be passionate about it or go find something else to make money, because I'm not saying that you won't get away with doing it without passion. I'm not saying that it's impossible to do it without passion, but what I'm trying to save you the hassle and the heartache of getting into something that I feel is very passion reliant and ultimately becoming heartbroken and potentially, financially ruined after you invest a lot in something thinking it's going to make you a whole bunch of money, and then like it doesn't work out and it's too hard and it's too difficult, and you might have a bad run of guests that are just terrible and disrespectful and whatever. You don't want to deal with that. If you're passionate about it, you'll push through. If you're not, it ends there. And that's all I'm going to say. Now, the next one is investment, okay? And this is super important. I've got my own opinions. I'm not telling anyone what to do, and this isn't financial advice, but I'm essentially telling you from this perspective, from my perspective as a vetted all-star host, how I would recommend going about this. Now, everyone's going to have their own circumstances, and that is totally understandable. And the way that anybody goes about starting a Turo business is going to completely vary. At one end of the spectrum, you might have, someone who's on a modest salary, has a spare car, or maybe they study part of the time and they work part of the time, and they want to just create a little bit of side income by renting their car out on Turo. In that case, the investment really is mostly your time, but you are going to have to account for extra maintenance, potential repairs, risk tolerances, because the risk does go up, and you're going to have to probably, foot the bill for some extra stuff, right? So it's not risk-free. Now, in the middle, you might have someone who's like, I like this, might buy a few vehicles, just run this on the side, still work full-time, run this on the side. And that's generally people who can afford to do that. I'd highly recommend not going into a large amount of debt to start a Turo business. Now, I don't want to be hypocritical. When I was 19, I bought a house. I paid like 300 something thousand for it. It's now worth 800. So I've been very fortunate that at the time I made a smart decision that's essentially helped me get to a point where I can refinance and invest in a business. Now, but Dave, you said don't go into debt. Like, okay, there's good debt and there's bad debt. Bad debt is like 20% interest, right? You go to a car dealership, anything that's like more than 10% interest, it's gonna suck you dry. And like I said, you're dealing with the depreciation issue. You're dealing with, if you buy new cars, they're going to depreciate, and you may not make back what you originally invested. Well, you definitely won't, but I would just be careful about that. So I've been in a fortunate position where I've been able to refinance my house, invest in a business, and I've got some help from my family too, and it's been very successful, and I have no regrets. It really hasn't added much onto the mortgage that I'm already paying and already negatively gearing. So for me, financially, that was the right way to do it. I would very much be skeptical of going out there and financing, 5 more cars just for the sake of it, because, that ties up a lot of capital, and it just adds extra pressure every week. You've got to make a certain amount of money just to make your nut and just be able to afford the repayments on those cars. And like I said, you've got to kind of think, if you're going to be a business person and you're going to do this seriously, you've got to think of the worst case scenario, which in some cases could be, like what if Australia runs out of petrol, like in a month's time? I don't want to sound crazy, but who actually really knows what's going to happen? Now, I've got very low repayments on the cars. I technically on paper own them outright because I paid cash for them, but that's obviously money that I got out from my house. Now, if you finance cars, you're committing yourself to potentially a dangerous situation if all of your cars are grounded off the road for whatever reason, and that's why I'd strongly recommend against it. The investment part is important because obviously you can't start a Turo business without investing in vehicles. If you're a little bit older, and you financially your ducks are in a row, and like you just love cars, and you've got the money, the cash to invest in building a business, absolutely go for it. Like that's probably the best case scenario. But someone my age, I'm 26 years old, right? So for me, it's difficult to have that amount of capital to be able to, invest in, say, 10 vehicles. And the other thing as well is I'd recommend probably starting at 2 vehicles, see how you can handle that, get another couple. And then once you're really confident with it, then you can sort of start getting more and more and more. I've heard of stories of people who have gone out and bought like 10 or 15 vehicles at once. Yeah, like each to their own. But I kind of feel like if you're going to do that, you're setting yourself up for an extremely stressful situation and unnecessarily a very steep learning curve. You're going to go from having it's from 0 to 100. And while that might be okay for some people, for anyone wanting to start a Turo business, I wouldn't recommend doing that. Now, the big one. A lot of people might look at a Turo business and go, how's this financially viable? Like genuinely, right? You got to buy cars, right? They cost money. So, you might start with let's just say you buy 10 cars and they're worth 30 grand each. That's $300,000. Now that's obviously a bit of a stretch on what most people are going to do, but I'm going to use it as an example because I want people to understand why Turo hosts actually invest in this and why it's more than just dollars and cents. So, you could probably use $300,000 to get a house. Realistically, $300,000 as a deposit to get a house, an investment property, if you will, and that will increase in value. It will. The problem with a house is it doesn't really pay you what you need to live. So, and listen to me carefully because I'm going to try and explain this in the best way possible. You buy a house, you put tenants in it, they're going to pay you for living there, but then you're also paying a mortgage as well. So most of the time, people are negatively gearing. So their mortgage doesn't even get covered by the rent they're getting paid. So if you invest in a house, that same money, you're not earning enough. Like you still got to work, right? Now, that same $300,000 spent on creating a Turo fleet, you know what you're effectively doing? You're effectively purchasing yourself a full-time job where you're the boss, right? And like it's so important for people to understand that. Yes, there's depreciation. Yes, there's maintenance costs. Yes, there's insurance, and there's other incidentals that you've got to pay. I understand that, but if you've got 10 vehicles, you could potentially make between 6 and 12 grand a month, depending on how expensive the vehicles are, what they're worth. Very possible, possibly even more. You might have to have G-Wagons or something, but realistically, if you have 10 cars, that's a full-time salary and it's a full-time job where you're the boss. So for me, as mentioned before, I've had some good bosses, I've had some not so good bosses, but in my life, I worked out very early on in life that I wanted to be my own boss. So for me, spending a few $100,000 to get into a business where I'm the boss, it was worth every cent, and I still love it to this day. So again, you might think, oh, well, on paper, it doesn't make complete sense to buy a bunch of assets that are going to depreciate and that are going to cost you money to maintain and may potentially become money pits if they get too old and get too many kilometers on them. But again, you got to look at the short term. A house isn't going to pay you between $6,000 and $12,000 a month. It's just not. A Turo business will. And even though those cars are aging and theoretically becoming less and less valuable per year, as you become a better Turo host and you get more 5-star reviews and you get more trips and more trust on the platform, you're going to get more bookings. So, it can be weird. Like you get a car that's worth $30,000 on your first year of being a Turo host and you might only make 10 grand. And then the following year, same vehicle is worth 25 grand. It's gone down 5 grand, but you end up making 20 grand because you've got more trust and you get more bookings. And, so like it's super important to understand that you're not really investing in cars. You're investing in yourself. You're investing in a lifestyle. Now, that lifestyle isn't perfect. Like I said, you're kind of always locked in, especially having a fleet of like 8+ vehicles. You're always locked in. You always have to have your phone nearby because someone might be out on a trip and something might happen and you might have to have like roadside assist come, or you might have to go deal with it yourself. I don't know, but it's important to always have to know that you're pretty much always locked in. And that's, by the way, I might come across like I'm cynical of people who work jobs. That's absolutely not true. For some people, they don't want all the responsibility to run a business, and that's fine. If you've got this far in this video and you're one of those people, then I probably wouldn't recommend this business because all the responsibility is on you. You don't have a boss, but your guests are essentially your boss. They determine your success, and you've got to treat them well because that's how you succeed. Now, I know before I went into the whole mechanical thing and, which cars, I just wanted to give you some short examples. I'm going to make another episode in the future where I'm going to be more specific about the vehicles that I would choose if I was starting a Turo business from scratch tomorrow. I didn't want to go in all the detail because obviously there's a lot of other brands I didn't mention. I didn't mention American cars. I didn't mention all the Japanese brands like Honda and like there's a whole bunch of other brands. I didn't talk about Holdens and Fords. There's a lot of things that I didn't cover and there's still a lot of things that I'm yet to cover. But this video is just to give you the best chance of trying to understand whether this business is right for you or not. Like I said, KPI. Super simple. Knowledge, passion, investment. If you've got all three of those things, then sure, be my guest. If you've got this far in this video, I want to sincerely thank you so much for supporting me. This is the first video we've ever made, and we're so excited to make more videos in the future. If you like my video, please like and subscribe. Follow us on the socials. It's just Lexington Garage. And yeah, if you're in Melbourne and you want to hire a car, send me a message and I'll look after you. Once again, I really appreciate the time you've taken to watch my video. I hope this helps. I can't wait to make more Australian Turo-based content because I really want to help everyone that I can understand whether this is the right thing for them or not. I get so many questions all the time, even from guests saying, oh, hey, do you recommend starting a Turo business? And I go, yeah, I got to make a video for this. I really have to make a video because I get it all the time. People ask me questions about insurance. How does that work? I'm going to cover all that stuff in future episodes. But for now, thank you and